What do people get wrong about TFO?
So I would say that one of the things that people is that because obviously their original job was to support green and blue, right? And obviously they started as, the Army's version of the CIA because mostly it was a human organization. And granted, I think it was 80s when Colonel Jerry King created it. I think it was like 80 or 81 when he created it.
Yeah, yes.
And at that time, SIGINT wasn't really much of a thing. Like SIGINT was just radios, right? When when the unit really started to like make its business, like make money, like they were the pioneers, especially like the SIGINT crushed. And so they became this like full intelligence spectrum organization. And they became so successful, which is one of the reasons that they started doing their own operations. And now they're more of the niche that they have tried to find is one, because green and blue really don't need them that they are this like this multi-theater, like world level intelligence organization that's what they try to be as like they run their own independent operations. If they can give intel back to the greater JSOC community, they can, but they're very independent nowadays.
And I think we got one more.
Yep. How have you seen operational preparation of the environment change over time?
So it has definitely changed, and it has definitely changed with technology. And I can go from this for a couple different ways. So from a tactical side of things, right? Obviously implementing drones and other things like that. And also from a force protection, as our abilities to conduct force protection, like just from the SIGINT side of things, became very limited as technology increased. And our ability, like, for example, I eventually in the unit, I went back to Iraq, like later on during the ISIS invasion. And it was one of the first Americans back in. And what we were doing 6 years prior, we couldn't even do a fraction of what we were doing there. And so we had to come up. Literally, one of the things that I did is and actually ended up getting an award for this. I actually helped create a new piece of equipment that the NSA ended up manufacturing for that particular mission. So, and then the combination of us doing SIGINT and also combining clan skills in the human side of things, which then technology from an alias standpoint of view, biometrics started to change things. And you had Ancestry.com, you had 23andMe, which are obviously explicitly told not to do for obvious reasons. And so it changed the way that we looked at the world and the way that we could do operations, because it wasn't the old school like 80s and 90s. We had to incorporate the technology, and then everything was becoming so digital, but also in such small form factors that you couldn't even detect when people were using particular technology. And you had like RFID sniffers, and then everybody's heard of a Faraday cage, right? We basically started we were like Iron Men, like completely encased in Faraday cages of like everything that you could protect. And we literally had to create SOPs, which I think was one of the cool things, because we were on the cutting edge of like these intelligent operations. And we did have, especially when I was there, we had such a good relationship with the agency. And one of the things that we ended up doing, and why we had such a close relationship with the agency, is if anybody understands the different types of authorities, like Title 10, Title 40, one of the reasons we started running and gunning with them was because we fall under DOD, they don't. And in certain situations, there were loopholes where we could do things that they couldn't, and vice versa. So we found that there was this tandem relationship that we could find loopholes between the two organizations. And so we actually built a really good, so I actually spent a lot of time in CIA spaces and a lot of different embassies throughout the world, which to be honest, those were some of, outside of the tactical stuff, some of my favorite missions.
Yeah, ISA is an interesting unit in the sense that you guys can conduct covert operations, clandestine operations, or just normal overt military operations.
Yeah,
I don't think there are too many people that can do that.
No, there's not. And I think that's one of the things that people confuse, like they think RRC and ISA are very similar organizations. And then that's like the big difference is one, I don't think RSC is nearly close to the size as ISA is,
No,
and has the reach, but also the clan side of things and the covert side of things is like where we separate and we do that RRC doesn't really do that much of. And actually, I will say this, we did, I never operationally worked with RRC, but I did a number of training exercises with RRC from the tactical detachment. And I will have to say, they are some of the most professional guys outside of CAG. I would say that RRC is probably one of the most professional organizations I've ever worked with.
They're wired tight.
Yeah. There's just something about Rangers in general that I just think, like, my advice to anybody, if you want to go to Delta, I would say go to Ranger and then go to Delta. Like, if you want to go to SF, cool. But like, I think you learn the greatest skills that you need to go to Delta from the Ranger Bat.
Yeah, man. No, Ranger Battalion's awesome. We got one more, D?
It's funny. It was a question about ISA and RRC interfacing, and you literally just answered it.
He just answered it. Okay.
Yeah. So we definitely interfaced on the tactical side of things, which, you know, we did a number of free fall jumps together. We did a couple of different, they were all training exercises, but yeah, they are definitely a very professional organization. You know, when you operate with blue and green, look, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but especially when you deal with blue, right? I will put it this way. I worked with them and I was on their Jort cycle, but the first time I worked with them was actually in free fall jump master course. So I'm there, and the free fall course is, you got the frogmen or your salters, right? And then you got your boat guys.
Yeah, the Swick guys.
And I have never seen like two groups of people who hate each other more than frogmen and boat guys. Literally, I went there. I was the only ISA student during this course. And we brought one of my mentors he was an instructor. So he actually helped instruct the course. We literally just sat there and we watched these two just basically rip each other in half. Like, we're doing like JMPIs, and these guys are calling each other, like almost going to blows on a daily basis. And dude, the boat guys just hate the frogmen. Like, that was my experience. And then the support guys there were just like, they lived in fear from their assaulters. And then you go to green and you're like, these dudes are my best friends. Like, they love these guys, right? So it was a very interesting culture.
And then how did the RRC bros compare to that?
They were very similar to CAG. Like, they definitely were like, these guys are enablers, right? And especially when they started going to, especially at CAG, when they started going to the intelligence squadron, because you will hear this a lot, especially from a SIGINT, right? And it's like par for the course, especially from 18 alphas. You'll have an 18 alpha who will come up to you and be like, hey, can you do this wizardry, right? And I'll be like, sir, that's not how RF energy works, right? You have to explain it to them. Like, that's not how any of this works, right? And then when you started having the CAG assaulters go and they start learning, you know, they learn human, they learn SIGINT, they learn everything, OSINT, you know, computer stuff. And then when they start going and they go back to the teams, and now they're working along their SIGINT guys, and they're like, oh, I understand how the machine works, and they understand its limitations. So their troop commanders were no longer giving these ridiculous requests like, hey, can you hit the satellite, beam it down, and then get, you know, all this stuff and his wife's stuff, and then, you know, get me some, you know, all these different things. Like, no, sir, I can't do that. And then, you know, and so they just developed this really good professional relationship, and they really started to appreciate their support guys, and they appreciate all their support guys. They treat them so well, like as far as any organization I've ever seen.